So you've trained the noblest of grappling arts, with all respect to other grappling arts like wrestling, BJJ, and judo. Which do you feel it's, for someone growing up in terms of athleticism, becoming stronger, going to compete, whatever venue it may be, either just staying in the grappling lane or going to the octagon, and also, of course, self-defense, which is best in those three to start with? And what do you think it's best to finish with, retire, because after years and years and decades, we beat our bodies up. I don't think, we can handle many, I don't know. I guess I know it differs from person to person, but which is best to, as a way to retire in a sense, because people say, when judo took out the leg grabs, it became useless, or it's not efficient. Now, I have a different opinion. It's gray opinion. This is a very long subject that I've discussed so many times. I've even discussed with Neil Adams himself. BJJ, the big problem with it is the lack of takedowns and, being comfortable standing up. Wrestling, submissions, but let's be honest, self-defense wise, I'd say submissions is the last thing you want to do, because when it comes to injuries and really getting into legal issues. But in your opinion, now looking back, you've mastered all three, you've competed, which is best to start with, as someone growing up, then which is best to, taper off into something else, or what should we transition into from the start to finish?
Well, I think for shaping a young potential combat athlete's life and helping them have mutual respect for both their teammates, opponents, themselves, from my own experience and from being involved in these three disciplines and watching the culture evolve within each discipline, I feel, and I'm a purist and I am a judoka at heart, I do feel like judo is the best base, for not just the fact that the respect element of bowing, of understanding like there's mutual respect for each other. And, you hear wrestling coaches don't respect anyone. And, sure, these are just isolated incidents sometimes of coaches, but there is kind of a culture that permeates wrestling that is a little bit more brutish. It's a little more blue collar, so to speak. And I think that is good later. I think it's good to be able to compete and work harder and have a good work ethic. But from the perspective of our youth, I think it's good to develop those, instill those really important foundational character traits, and using your partner, understanding being an uke and a tori, and being able to balance your body weight in certain ways that go to the ground, where you also develop ground skills. I think judo has all of those things, where some of these other disciplines are missing that. And I think judo has a lot of these foundational traits that growing up you can transfer into wrestling or jiu-jitsu easier than starting these other disciplines and then trying to move into judo, because judo does have a lot of skill-based portions of it, like having to understand kazushi and these elements that are far greater than just athleticism. You have to understand movement and where someone's going to be. So you have to be able to almost time travel a little bit, where if you move one way, they're going to move this way, and you're going to anticipate that movement. And you don't have to be a freak of nature to grasp those concepts. So I do think it instills good things like flexibility, coordination, balance. All these things are very you can transfer these skills that you've learned into wrestling or into jiu-jitsu. And with that being said, I think wrestling would be a good secondary sport, and jiu-jitsu would be a great one to just ride off into the sunset with, because you can develop your own. I mean, there's more variables in jiu-jitsu, first of all. There's more ways to be able to win, not just with submissions, but on your feet, on the ground. There's much less rules that are not allowing you to cross grip or break grips. So you could find your own little niche and develop where it's comfortable for your body. Whether you are really beat up, you could still find a way. Whereas I feel like judo later becomes more debilitating, where you have to kind of grip a certain way and you have to use these few series of techniques that are now legal to win. And at a certain age, you age out. It's very difficult to sustain that, to be able to use those techniques effectively for the rest of your days. I mean, it's a great sport and I really do appreciate it. It's beautiful, but there's a certain level of age where you do age out. And I think wrestling, the culture in wrestling for that midsection, there isn't really a recreational spot for the sport in America, at least. You're either in high school or college, or you're trying to be an Olympian. The 40-year-old guy that wants to go wrestle doesn't really have a home. A lot of these clubs don't exist. So usually those skills transfer into jiu-jitsu academies. You start to learn jiu-jitsu, and that's where it kind of is already there. It's already facilitated. A lot of these jiu-jitsu academies have a wrestling class, or have a no-gi takedown class, or have a judo class, which, I'm not against. I wish that American judo and some of these other countries would have a more unifying culture that had a more presence of dojos for judoka to go to, but a lot of these now get absorbed by like jiu-jitsu academies, which isn't bad. It keeps the recreational judoka being able to be active, but at some point it would be great to have a judo dojo in every town or a few in every city that can help foster and develop the future champions.
Mm. I see. And which do you feel transitions better out of the three into the octagon?
Well, I mean, there's three styles of wrestling. So if we're going to even get deeper into this, there's freestyle wrestling, which is like in the Olympics. There's folk style wrestling, which is an American style of wrestling. And then there's Greco-Roman wrestling, which is more upper body. So I think out of those three wrestling disciplines, folk style wrestling translates the best to mixed martial arts, to MMA, rather than freestyle or even Greco. Greco actually translates a little bit better to mixed martial arts, in my opinion, than freestyle. So folk style wrestling, I don't know if you're familiar with this rule set and the style differences from freestyle and Greco, but you actually have to get up off the bottom, or you have to hold someone down when you take them down. You don't get awarded points by throwing them to their back like freestyle and Greco or judo. You have to remain in control, almost like jiu-jitsu, where if you take someone down and they roll and then you both end up on your feet, there's really nothing that happens. So it's more like that, where you have to take them down and remain in control for a duration of time that's like a second long. You have to have their back, or you have to have both of their legs with them seated and you with your head on top. So that in itself makes it much more realistic to the fact that once the takedown is accomplished, the person that gets taken down doesn't get a free stand-up. And that's excluding all the takedowns and pummeling and grappling that correlate with those takedowns, which are really important. So I think a mixture between Greco and folk style wrestling are the most important for mixed martial arts. Judo's great. The concepts within judo, breaking someone's balance, and some of the techniques are really translatable. But I think fundamentally, the concepts and application of technique within folk style and Greco wrestling are predominantly the most successful, that work in when things get to a clinch